So, welcome back. I'm gonna be doing my makeup, and I'm also going to be doing get chatty, get ready with me. I'm trying somebody else's makeup look today, so it's gonna be a little different, and I've kind of put all of her looks together. This is Rachel Finley, Hydration CEO. This is the video I'm kind of basing it on. And today I'm going to be talking about why the racing world should stop saying that either Max Verstappen or Yuki Tsunoda are going to Aston Martin. So Rachel's first step is to put on a glowy base. I don't have a glowy base, so I'm just gonna use the Vitamin Enriched face base. And again, if you're watching these because you want to chat to get ready with me, but you don't care about Formula One, I'm so sorry. This is probably really annoying that I seem to only have one topic I want to talk about. But I do. Anyway, my biggest issue with all of these comments, and they're pretty consistent like every week, and I'm going to start with Max, is that I feel like people are making these quotes because they want to be like clickbait and they're not actually listening to the driver. Now, essentially, hold on, I need to move this mirror. Essentially, I try to take people at face value and hear what they're saying and hear what their outlets are saying. So the Max, shoots from the hip. I don't agree. I think he lets the media do, his preferred media vendors do the legwork for him. Max has kind of said over and over again a few things. One, he's very happy at Red Bull because of the loyalty that they show. Two, when he becomes a father, he's probably going to step back from racing. And yeah, mostly those two things. So one of the things,
again, this is allegedly, there's been no transparency for Red Bull about the situation.
That has been kind of a story over the past year is the brain drain from Red Bull Racing, compounded with the Christian Horner issues. I do think there's some merit to them just because the person in question was Adrian Newey's assistant, and I don't think that he would have walked unless it personally affected him. So there's some huge push behind that. But as we all know, Max is going to become a father sometime this year in 2025. And also, he's won 4 championships. And he's very happy at Red Bull. Also, Max is not a dummy. He's not an idiot. And part of that is kind of seeing how the future has been laid out and how it's different for him. So Max has never been one who's like, my dream is to go to Ferrari. He's never been like that. And that's what Seb wanted. And Seb's the only other world champion that Red Bull has produced. So if you don't follow racing and you're kind of like, who is this? He's the current world champion. He's won 3 undisputed titles and 4 disputed titles. And you can argue with the wall about that. And he's raced for the same team his whole entire racing career. Because he raced for the junior team his first season in the sport, and then he raced for the senior team ever since. So what I mean is Max is loyal to Red Bull is that no matter where he's going, there's never going to be a situation like Red Bull. Essentially, once Helmut scouted him at 12, they've put a lot of work into him, and one of the things you see with Vettel, with Ricardo as well, is once you leave the Red Bull system, you're going to struggle a little bit because Red Bull has a very specific system of training their drivers. It has a very specific driver academy. I think the only driver that's kind of outside of that is Yuki, but Yuki has another reason for not being involved in this story. He's never known a life outside of it, and unlike other drivers, Red Bull has fully catered to him. And if he was going to walk away from the situation that he's in, he will never be treated the same way. And something Max says he's valued over and over and over again is loyalty. Total Wolff at Mercedes has proven he is the most unloyal. I have a lot of issues with Total Wolff. But he is the most unloyal TP to ever exist. And then we have Aston. So those are the two places that people say that he will go. My reason that Max wouldn't go is that he will never be number one at Aston. And this is a huge talking point because whether you like it or not, I know most of you do not read the Aston Martin press releases. Your favorite driver isn't Fernando Alonso. You're not trying to figure out what's going on a good 80% of the time. Aston, time and time and time again, has been a project based around Lance Stroll. Whether you love him, whether you hate him, whether you wish, I don't know, he'd retired with the wrist accidents, those are the facts. Like, you will not be able to get around the fact that Aston is Lance. This is weird to me. She like contours her nose. That's so weird. Not in a bad way, just. Ooh. And so Lance will always be the priority. And that also is them building this team from the ground up and in a very different way. But time and time again, I mean, Mike Crack for whatever is going on over there. I kind of saw the writing on the wall that Mike was looking to leave when he got rumored to be going to Audi. But Mike has said it, Fernando has said it, I think Seb had said it as well. You will not have that team without Lance on it. And Lance likes being teammates with Fernando. Fernando likes being teammates with Lance. And Fernando also knows that they are prioritizing him to win. But it's also because Lance has never won a race yet. But he also knows he needs to be kind to Lance. And I mean, my biggest issue is that throughout all of my time in Formula One, I don't think Lance Stroll is a really weird, like, he's not a bad person. It's just the media kind of being nasty to him, and people don't have minds of their own. So people are like, oh, he's crazy. I mean, yeah, but at this, like, not crazy. That's not what, he's like, he was kind of crazy for beaching that car. But I also think he was doing that in protest because the AM24 sucks so bad. But Max will never be the priority at Aston Martin, just like Fernando's kind of, they're like co-priorities right now. But also, Max has not been the nicest to Lance. And like, there's a difference between not being nice to somebody. Like George Russell's dislike of Lance Stroll in Formula 3 has some merit to it. You know, I get why George felt that way 1,000,000%. But Max literally calling him slurs on the radio, calling Lance slurs on the radio, and refusing to apologize to it and the whole entire country of Mongolia kind of speaks to him as a person. Because he really hasn't grown back, he hasn't grown up fully. And I know a lot of Max vendors will say he has grown up fully. He has not grown up fully enough to be in a situation where he is not the top priority. And you know what? He shouldn't have to. But Aston is not the place for him, not only because, like, I mean, Lance is actually pretty good at turning the other cheek. Felipe Drugovich, who is their reserve driver, has said some pretty nasty things about Lance for calling it a bag. But he's still got his job there anyway, which is somebody who I do not think deserves that job because a reserve driver is supposed to better the car, and it doesn't seem like Felipe's done that the past 2 seasons. I also think Felipe, if he wants a Formula 1 seat, needs to go to a different series and prove himself because he's never going to get that Aston seat. Once Fernando retires, it's going to be in the hands of either somebody in their academy who they've worked very hard to develop, or somebody who's a proven winner. My, of course, choice for the Aston Martin seat is George Russell. Not only do the two of them have a natural narrative, Stroll and Russell, I think it will be the final kick that Lance needs to remind himself that he's a racing driver. I also think that George won't be able to ever win at Mercedes. I would love to be proven wrong. I do like the whole George Russell with the Viper nickname winning in the year of the snake. I think that would be hysterical. But this is so weird. My face is so light. My face is so light. Yeah, I look crazy. Anyway, that's why I'm doing blush. But yeah, so essentially Max will never be top dog at Aston, and it's a different style. So, you know, like the Red Bull racing style is very different, like how they run their team. And the one thing that you can say about Aston is they keep everything behind closed doors. They will only let you know something's going on like once every 6 weeks in the team principal update. I don't know if the new team principal is going to be doing the same thing that Mike was doing. I kind of hope he does. This is also very weird to focus the blush so close to my eyes. I hope he does, because I do think that's a really solid, it's a solid way to do things, but Max is very used to having like the Telegraph and all of the press people that his family deals with, like not only him but his father deals with, be able to say what they want. And Lawrence Stroll and the team at Aston do not let that happen. Like, I don't think that he doesn't want to even have the risk of a muzzle being put on there. And I'm not saying like Fernando has a muzzle put on. Fernando has made comments, but at the same time, he's very comfortable and at ease in that team situation. And that's also it. I think Aston's a lot healthier of a team situation, and I don't know if Max would be able to handle that. Like, they do have their blow-ups and everything. I'm not saying Aston's like this perfect team, but they're building from the bottom, so they are trying to, you know, create a decent work environment. And if there's one thing that's blaringly obvious about Red Bull, it's this not a decent working environment. So not only would Max be walking away from essentially the people that grew him in a way that I wouldn't even say Vettel did, because Vettel's family isn't this freaking involved with the racing. Like, it's not, it's like comparing a Granny Smith apple to a Red Delicious apple. Yeah, they're both apples, but there's different tastes. I just feel like I'm mumbling on. So essentially, at the core, Max will not leave Red Bull unless he's going to be going to a different series, which has less demands on him as a father, so he can spend time at home with his cats and his bonus daughter, as he calls her, and his new child, and his Kelly. His partner. His Kelly. That's not, Kelly's, that's not a job or a descriptor. But that's the reason, because Aston is very strategic upon who they put in that other seat. It is, in my opinion, that Aston needs to acquire Russell and Stroll needs to take a year off, not because I don't think Lance Stroll is a bad driver or whatever, but I do think his confidence has been completely shot, especially with the absolute shitbox that the AM24 was. Like, Lance doesn't complain to the press because the press always misconstrues what he has to say, even though he did fall asleep at a press conference this year, which was kind of funny. I don't blame him, because I would not want to be driving that car either. This is not looking good. And, like, it's just too many variables to just change teams like that when you're at the top of the world. And I mean, I could see him Lance going to WEC for a year. I think Lance is a very good teammate, and I think World Endurance will build his confidence up a little bit more, which I think is desperately needed. And then have Russell in the seat for a year, get him comfortable next to Alonso. I think he would have a lot of fun with that. I think George would blend in very well with the team at Aston, with the situation at Aston. He's very well loved still down at Williams. Obviously, Williams is not currently an option for him. But I do think the only way George Russell is going to win a world championship is to leave Mercedes, even if he doesn't win at another team, to come back to Mercedes, because I think Toto Wolff needs a wake-up call. I also think if Susie Wolff wasn't still involved with the F1 Academy, that Susie Wolff should be the team principal of Mercedes. But since that's not a possibility, I do think Toto needs to hire an actual team principal, and I think that, like, somebody who's been there a really long time should do that. I don't think Toto should be this involved. I don't think he's as clear-headed as he would like to think he is. I think Russell should be in that seat, then Alonso retires, and then we'll have
Russell Stroll
for 2027, and we'll see where it goes from there. Because if Lance Stroll decides to say, screw Formula One, I don't know if Lawrence Stroll will keep his investment in there. He's made money from the Formula One team. He's brought the brand up by a crazy amount. And if he walks, I mean, he spent all this time and money developing a campus, a technology campus, really doing a lot of legwork. And I don't know if anybody else would be able to afford to buy him out. That's the thing. I don't think Aston would close, but I think it would cause the loss of a lot of jobs and a lot of, just like a lot of negative things. So I don't think him going there will be solid. And yeah, I do think that if I was Lawrence Stroll, I would be targeting the shit out of George Russell right now. Toto is obviously in delusional land. My son is not a very big press person, even though I think Lance, who he is as a person, is very interesting and funny and cheeky, but I don't blame him for not wanting to talk to the press. But George loves to talk to the press, he loves to do that sort of stuff, and so to have that person go out there and be the face and the ambassador, especially since Aston has marketed themselves as an English brand, having an Englishman go do all of that would be really exciting. I think George is also like very classically handsome, so I think that would work well with their branding partners. Not like Lance is ugly, but like I just think it would be a good choice in general. And then I do think a year in WEC, or even, I mean, honestly, I don't think anybody can just go do the Indy 500 if I'm going to be completely transparent. So I wouldn't say Lance can go do the 500. The 500 is, I love IndyCar, so 500 is like, oh, you can do the 500. No, like, you've got to be prepared for that. That's not something you go do when you're struggling with confidence. It's something you go do when you're ready. And then other people I think could go into the Aston seat. I do think Pout Award, his contract is up in 27, but as long as he wins the 500 this year or next year, I think Lawrence Stroll has enough money to acquire him. And I think having an all North American team would be solid. I don't think she does this. I think I'm just doing it because I wanted to. I don't normally wear black eyeliner. But there's that. And then we're going to get into Yuki Tsunoda. So honestly, I don't think a Yuki and Lance lineup or a Yuki and Fernando lineup would be any sort of bad. I genuinely think essentially that Red Bull is horrendous for treating Yuki the way that they do. I would love to see Pierre and Yuki reteamed at Alpine. I think that honestly, the fact that didn't get to happen this year, and so we're going through the whole Jack Doohan, maybe Franco Colapinto, maybe not, rigmarole is very interesting. I think that if I was Flavio, I would just be waiting for Yuki's contract to be up and then giving him a call, especially with his ties to Honda. That's the reason a lot of people say that, Yuki's gonna go to Aston because he's Honda. Frankly, if you've ever listened to Yuki talk about how Honda has supported him, it's not like the best. They don't really have a lot of influence, because if Honda had a lot of influence, Yuki would be in the second seat, or Red Bull wouldn't have an engine. I guarantee you, if they had that much pull, Red would not have an engine. And the reason I don't think Yuki should go to Aston Martin is because I don't think that's what he wants. Because then it'll be the whole entire thing he's facing now, which is, oh, his seat was bought. Oh, his seat was this. Oh, his seat was that. Instead of just saying, oh, Yuki's a good driver. He's solid. He's reliable. If we put him in a solid and reliable car, even if it's not the best, he can pull something out of the hat. He gets along with our talent. He has a nice fan base that's not crazy. You know, like, there are a lot of positives to that. And I don't necessarily think it has to be at Aston. And in fact, I don't think it should be at Aston just because I don't want to hear the pay driver or bought a seat narrative around Yuki. I want to hear the, you know, Yuki is a good driver. And honestly, I don't ever want to wish ill on somebody, especially in this sport, because wishing ill on somebody in a somewhat deadly sport is kind of a very nasty and mean-spirited thing to do. But I do hope that Liam struggles, because I don't think Liam should be in that seat. And I think when Yuki walks, I don't think Red Bull ever admit that they are racist, but I do think that they're going to have to come to terms with the fact they lost a good second-seater, especially if Max is on his way out the door to go be a father. You lost somebody who could replace that because he's not blonde, white, and that's really just sad. But yeah, I don't think Yuki's gonna go there, not because I don't think he would get along with Lance. Honestly, if Honda wasn't an element, 100%, I'd be gunning for Yuki in that seat. I think it would be great. I think Aston is a really great environment for any driver. I just don't want to hear, like, the one thing about Formula One is that people use the same narratives over and over and over again. And I just get so sick of hearing them because it's like, you're just repeating what the press has to say. You're not repeating an individual idea. And don't be like, oh, is that why you want George Russell in the seat? No, I want George Russell in the seat because of the minute Lance Stroll moved to Europe, the two of them were up on top of each other until Lance went to F1. I think that Lance and his family handled the criticism that George gave in F3 better than Max did, which is kind of crazy. I also think that it would be a good full circle moment for Lawrence Stroll for, you know, essentially evicting somebody who he was worried was going to challenge his son in racing from Prima, and now paying him to race against his son. I think it would, again, like I said, be a good press thing, because then Lance can essentially get out of press things and leave it to George. If you don't know, Tommy Hilfiger is actually a very close personal friend of Lawrence Stroll, and a lot of older Lance posts actually have Tommy Hilfiger comments on them. So I'm not saying that Tommy is leaving Mercedes, everybody knows that, but Tommy's also sponsoring a Formula One team F1 Academy team by himself this year. I do think Tommy is still very actively interested in motorsports, and I do think that both Carmen, and George are still partners with, oh shoot, I need to do a highlight, and with Tommy, so it's not like it would be a huge jump. I also think Tommy fits Lance's personal style a little bit more than Boss does. But that's just me kind of doing observation. I just think genuinely it would be a really solid partnership. And I mean, it wouldn't have to be forever, just like 2 seasons. I think it would better George as a driver because of having that confidence to step outside of Mercedes. And I think all of the greatest drivers have been able to change teams and still be successful. A good example is obviously Lewis Hamilton, which we'll see this year, Fernando Alonso, Michael Schumacher, like, they're able, Jackie Ickx, Fangio, like, James Hunt, essentially Lauda, and I do think George has that in him. I think that George has trained underneath the greatest of all time the past couple of seasons, and George has the hubris to do it. And I think putting him in that situation with somebody who grew up racing him and who, they're not similar racing styles, but they are styles that will go well together. And I think they could learn a lot from each other. But, I mean, at the end of the day, if Yuki goes to Aston, it'll be a really similar situation, except that there will be no natural narrative between Yuki and Lance. And I do think that will involve a little bit of struggle. Some of the best part of Lance and Fernando is that Fernando's known Lance since he was in Ferrari Academy. like since he was like a little 12-year-old. And one of the things that they keep saying is that Lance is learning. Eventually Lance is going to have to no longer have people teaching him and have somebody next to him that he can challenge and that can challenge him. I do think that Lance has made Fernando a better teammate, if I can be 100% transparent. It's very similar to how VB and Lewis were, Lance being the VB in that situation. But I do think there's a time for a challenge. So, in essence, I think Max is going to stay at Red Bull until his contract is out, and then he will probably take a little bit of time off to explore his options. As somebody who watches IndyCar, do not see Max being successful in IndyCar because I think that there's a certain temperament that belongs in IndyCar, and I don't think Max has it. It's not his skills. I think Max could do WEC very easily. Again, Le Mans, I think Max has the mentality to do like Dakar and do rally racing. I think that would be his next life. If I can be 100% honest with you, that would be best suited for him. Having just watched some of Dakar, I think that would be really cool. And if you don't know Dakar, that's what Carlos Sainz Sr. drives. He DNF'd, but he's 60, and also he rolled his car. That was crazy. I don't think Max will stay in Formula One much longer. Like, what else does he have to do? Because he's not really focused on doing the Lewis Hamilton of it all, challenging himself outside of his team. I don't think Yuki will do it because I don't think Honda has a strong enough pull. I also want Yuki to be somewhere on merit and not have that narrative follow him around. And what else? As always, pushing my George Russell to Aston Martin 2026. I want Toto Wolff to come to terms with the fact he developed a phenomenal driver and is now stepping over his 7-time world champion with Mercedes, who then left to Ferrari, and then the guy he developed from scratch from age 15 for a child.
An aside that I do not want to see Kimmy fail, just Toto.
So, I like to see him fall and get a little bit of a taste. I don't think George will ever leave unless it's explained to him directly. So, curious. Now, getting to this look.
So, I'm going to do a voiceover of this part because I'm just kind of looking at the camera, and I wear glasses, so I can't really see myself super well in the viewfinder otherwise. Thanks for sticking with me and me being a little bit repetitive on my thoughts about why neither Max Verstappen or Yuki Tsunoda is headed to Aston Martin. If you're curious as to why I did my makeup this way, again, I'm doing it like somebody else does it, so not necessarily my cup of tea, but it didn't turn out too bad. And thank you for joining me.
I guess talk to you later, but